Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So, we are now on week 12 lecture. As I mentioned earlier, the remaining 2 weeks will be devoted to some basics of common law. I consider the scope would be comprehensive, but the deals would not be exhaustive and would be dealt in the context of focus or some basic elements of laws as you will experience through the lecture. Initially, I like to use some very useful books. The author to which is an international scholar from Japanese origin and named Ukuyama, has provided good paragraphs and classic works to expose you some basics and historical implications and the kind of highlight about over the wake of a common law evolution. So very helpful to shoot our class purpose. Unfortunately, I lost that item, so I made every effort to search to recover that book. And previously, I also prepared some handout delivered in class hours, and you will keep some more copies. But please disregard that source. So I actually have been highly disappointed that had to change my initial ambit about this class plan. Instead, I will provide some of basic laws over a principal subject usually taught in the first year of law school matters. So the weeks will be spent in that dimension. I now introduce you to some of 6 basic subjects. You will well imagine if a first year law exam or by examiners would often be highly interested in the scope of a discussion. Constitutional law, contract, tolls, civil procedure, and criminal law, and others. What are others? As a criminal procedure, for example, and in some cases you will be interested in a community property and the kind of family law series, and also you will be required to explore trusts and wills or other fundamentals required in the practice of law. So the subject will be tested in the by exams, and also would be explained for the first year, for the grade of first year course in your law school. So highly important in my supposition, and that aspect would of course not be the same. We are now pursue the kind of a basic test and also some a framework of or system and historical evolution and the kind of a cultural elements to distinguish between two major legal traditions. It's a kind of purpose is well with us. So I'm not sure if this approach would help you out through the end of this term. Nonetheless, I find it kind of alternative to make up for the remaining 2 weeks. So please keep through your focus beyond the legal research, and I actually propose to take a journey with me for some area of law, or what actually considered highly important to inculcate the junior lawyers and perhaps competitive students or between a legal system. So perhaps it will be one idea that we begin with some procedural issues, especially with a civil procedural, then consider its effect and the kind of inchoate stage of thinking about one national legal system. So we would be embroiled often times and routinely with civil matters. We dispute to claim back the lent money or amount of a kind of contract to sell the goods, and the seller may claim the payment as agreed upon the sales contract, for example. And in that case, we will use the kind of arbitration, which is private in nature, and may be compelled to organize the arbitration panels to resolve the disputed case. And that context could fail, that one party may seek some judicial proceeding in claiming back their civil rights. So civil action would be one very intimate context that interacted in the civil society as a matter of law. Then the federal system in the United States would pose challenges about that system. So the kind of procedural issue would arise in terms of litigation and competent jurisdiction, for example. So you know some important case, international issued case, that would actually be a momentum to enlarge the general concept of a traditional jurisdiction. For example, in-rem jurisdiction, in personam jurisdiction would be principle that could bind and restrict the exercise of competence of respective jurisdiction. That framework had been actually effective and higher extent, perhaps, and long-arm statute would follow the principles and laws what actually established in the international issue case. So the notion of a fair play and the kind of a federalism in progress would be considered by the court, that the minimum context theory would have been developed. So that is one important aspect, often challenged in the federal system of civil code. So civil litigation. So that context would now be related to kind of a diversity jurisdiction, for example, and the federal issues. So you will also get the theory, what interlegal, what we call area doctrine, and kind of a federal jurisdiction would comes as secondary concern. So basically, the international shoe case would trigger the competence of state jurisdiction. So now the state court, so we can distinguish those matters in terms of some legal theories leveraged between two dimensions of the judicial system. The state court now has a ample space, which is plenary to exercise the jurisdiction, notwithstanding any traditional theory, kind of in-name or impersonal jurisdiction that would require the state court to be highly restrained about their jurisdictional power. So often, but the nationalization has progressed to create the kind of favorable circumstances in terms of a legal consequence. So that is one great lesson, perhaps through the constitutionalism in the United States, especially involving the civil litigation. The idea is also insightful, leading you to the kind of a distinct taste embedded in federal system and the kind of progress of nationalization and the kind of a interchange of a system of civilization could well be apprehended in the context. And also the kind of progress would be analogous to the international movement in many aspects. For example, you will see the ways of interaction. Now, evidence of history in the United States have inculcated the international legal scholars. So the concept of model law would have been practiced over a long period of time in the United States, United Nations, involving the uniform private law movement or any kind of initiative to enact any international conventions or kind of laws and legal system which is soft basically, and oftentimes, but in some cases you see another sort of laws we could receive a same traditional form, what we often call a hard laws. Is the concept is distinct in the international, the area of international laws, especially private law. You will see a sort of laws and codes, uniform commercial code would be a domestic commercial statute. Nonetheless, you will see some soft laws produced by ICC, International Chamber of Commerce, the kind of UCP for the letters of credit, for example, and also the kind of principles would follow the formality that the United States obeyed on actually to respond with challenges. So for example, the restatement is one important and remarkable product which is successful and now accepted as authoritative source of law in the United States. So the civil procedure would actually ignite your interest. Allows you to enter the kind of interests of American legal system and the kind of rich preserve. So please make yourself friendly with a foreign legal system, and please find the clue to get you intimate and interchangeable and actually compatible in personal propensity with other foreign legal systems. So please have a thought about civil procedure and consider some distinct element that the United States is a federal union. So how do we actually generate the kind of a circuit system to match up with the demand of justice? What is justice? I think defendant would be prejudiced if the long-arm statute would be used abusively. The minimum context theory would facilitate the kind of civil concept of procedural issues, or the kind of integrity and uniformity and convenience about a jurisdictional question could be resolved, which is expected to provide a utility and service to the citizens in dispute. And also consider other theories about a federal system. As I've introduced, you perhaps have well grasped and possess basic understanding about the federal jurisdiction involving civil suit, and the amount dollars would actually divide to compel the competent jurisdiction be exercised, and small claims would be made distinct from other kind of action, and also diversity between parties. So we call diverse jurisdiction, which requires the federal court becomes a suitable forum to resolve the case in the kind of concern. And I also like to raise in this class the concerns and your I now implore your attention on the constitutional law of the United States. So perhaps the structure in terms of our intelligence so would not be defaulted. Actually, it could be shared between two major legal traditions. So we could learn the powers of the federal government in the United States Constitution, and that is one genre which perhaps cover the half of your hours in the constitutional studies, and also you will have many lessons involving the issues of individual rights. So the infringement of human rights as safeguarded by Constitution is of course a significant constitutional issue that to be deliberated by jurors or jurists. That is same. And we also consider private action if the Constitution could operate penetrating through the action. As you know, the Constitution is public law, with meaning that the norms would regulate the action of government. So the kind of laws enacted by the Congress and rules created by public agencies would be put to question if that could survive the constitutional test of muster. The kind of framework is notorious, as you have acquired in your class of this department. That is also the same in the American legal system. So you will perhaps encounter the kind of a theory, state action theory. What does it mean? So in some cases, the Constitution may be applied to private action. Consider, for example, the kind of influential organization, which is public. Of course, includes the private entities, the kind of big business, shopping malls, and others. Then the kind of action could be attributed as similar with the traditional pattern of a governmental action. So the kind of public intervention could be found as a matter of analogy, and in terms of constitutional theory, that the private enterprises should respect the constitutional values, often prescribed in express terms, or in some cases implied nature of liberty interest or rights would be found. So enumerated rights would be well captured in your constitutional master, and that would not end our query and discussion. So implied nature of a human right or interest in the kind of unenumerated rights should be honored, and entails the kind of constitutional question whether the statute or rules or action of private entity will conform with the constitutional requirement of the man. So the kind of idea is actually commanded, and you'll find provision about the concept of enumerated rights. So that is be viewed as a basis of a catch-all frames in we find the wisdom of drafters. So the human rights is evolutionary, and the juror and jurists could be wiser to exercise their views and the kind of a philosophical stance through the end consequence. What is the required to make one as person, or person as one, or the kind of paragon that is expected as human? The kind of approach is essential if you now deals with the constitutional question or others. And you also see the importance of First Amendment freedoms and the kind of a establishment clause what actually founded basic cornerstone in this republic. And so we actually espouses the idea very preciously through the democracy of the United States and constitutionalism of the United States. And we generally agree that the First Amendment freedoms is an indispensable prerequisite to practice modern democracy. So freedom to express views, ideas, and state the facts or kind of idea and religious belief should be ensured from intervention of government or establishment clause and right to associate or kind of many a familiar series and rules perhaps would be recalled in your mind or understanding, and what a content-based regulation, content-neutral regulation. The idea is what actually developed by the code that the government should act as an administrator. They should not evaluate the kind of values or methods of expression. So content-neutral regulation would often survive the constitutional test. The standard of test would be generally generous than content-based regulation. So manner, time and manner and place restriction is one important rule that the Supreme Court of the United States have long espoused in handling the area of dispute and contention. And also you will see some important distinction between political and commercial speech or expressions. Often the political speech will be ensured a more affordable shield, constitutional protection, since it actually is very inchoate and what a fundamental foundation to interact political interchange. So it is philosophically hyped that the First Amendment freedoms would be creative about actually formulating the government power. So we actually would be gone in the first dimension that we are free to express political ideas and also the kind of concept. Nonetheless, we still see many standards and what actually principles that the First Amendment right is not absolute, could be regulated from public reason or a governmental purpose. The importance of this right is therefore relative, amenable in a balancing test. What actually you will see is some important principle or clear and present danger rule, which can lead us to some distinct flavor of this constitutional law, and we also find many out of terms to cherish the importance of this liberty and freedom of expression. Nonetheless, we still see the kind of scrutiny that the governmental action could deserve a constitutionality. So please read many cases which deals with specific contingency situation. For example, the circumstances would also operate to, but in some cases, militate against the expected extent of constitutional protection. Consider the war times that the nation would confront with the enemies commercial. So you will know the anti-sedition act, the kind of anti-communist act, still standing in the United States, and the application of that kind of law would be stricter when the nation is engaged in war theater. Kind of, you recall the context of case development in post-World War II and the times during the World War II or World War I, and also you'll see some emergency powers of President Youngstown and State case, and the Supreme Court would endorse implied power of President to seize the steel company or others. So the Constitution actually has no provisions, only provisions relating with the challenges with the war-making power of Congress, and some provision which confers the status as a commander-in-chief on the presidency. The kind of question could not be detailed in prescription, so should be restructured as a matter of case law. So consider the leniencies of Supreme Court justices who often consider the practical consequence of that judgment orders. You will also recall the kind of interesting development involving Iraqi war orders. You perhaps come across the term used by political scientists, what is political justice. So often social scientists would contend the policy of a Supreme Court Supreme Court in the United States, and the term would generally as flavor to disfavor the position of a Supreme Court. So one of the critics which raises is actually suspicion about adequate response. So how would the Supreme Court advance to enforce the kind of we in last class considered Anti-Terrorism Act, for example, or the death penalty, and in that case the death penalty has been guaranteed and actually facilitated in the context where the United States need to interact to deter terrorism. So many precious theory about habeas corpus and human rights protection has been well curtailed, since the issue is critical and often involves national compassion and the kind of basic values shared by international community. So terrorism widely being condemned by many liberal states and civilized countries, and political justice could shed one negative implications about this severity. However, the situation could well provide a due justification about a national response. So, how do you appreciate between two viewpoints? And so we could be eclectic in understanding, and also the kind of law and legal theory, perhaps a sensibility of justice would be not constant. We could be idealistic to demand a constancy of justice. Nonetheless, could be circumstantial, as you suppose, and the kind of understanding, and especially in exchange for the political consequence and the kind of so the idea, for example, national consensus, what actually proposes a critical as a critical standard in endorsing the legitimacy of death penalty, as we learned in the last class. So the Supreme Court just cited the statistics and the trend of a national opinion, or whether to advance to endorsing the death penalty or discourages system. The kind of process to weigh between competing interests is important, and the basic dynamism in the society community could well fuel the energy and the kind of a more practical, pragmatic result that could be obtained in addressing the challenges. So the kind of concern need to be apprehended, as you see, and many point of considerations are very helpful to comprehend the American legal system and American laws. For example, you will see regulation of interstate commerce and the taxation of state government. The idea would be borrowed by international authorities. For example, the commerce issue is fairly meaningful in terms of political unity or integration. The idea could now be contested in the European context of free flow of labors, the idea of free flow of commodities, and the justifiable extent of state regulation in the EU membership or governance. How could Germany regulate the commerce? So, and also you will see the founding effect of this clause or interstate commerce to progress the federal unionization in the United States, and many cases have come as a support to what actually create due frames about what you see the kind of federalism in when you explore the topic interstate commerce. So consider many cases to see the deep nature of U.S. laws, and what you will also see the what a profound impact of equal protection of law in the United States, and that deals would be very pioneering, as you expect, leading to many modern concepts of democracies. So we now a creature equally born in front of law. So law is kind of a replacement from the traditional being or super beings. Law would be supreme to or actually bestow each justice for person matters, and should the unequal treatment or discrimination is against the will of law, God, and many series have been received importantly to create the proteges of U.S. constitutionalism. We actually received some very precious series, kind of a political question. What is the doctrine of political question? So you will perhaps evoke the operation of a separation of power principle, and the political branches would have a distinct area to interplay and or carry the constitutional mission, and the judiciary would operate in check and balance with other branches, broader branches. The cases, in some cases, may raise some political question, which could not be adjudicated in standard of what laws and what is. So, what appreciable judicial standard could lack in some cases an area of interest. Then it is undesirable that the court could involve to dispose the case in any judicial terms. So the political question doctrine would function to save the kind of dilemma. And now you will see some expanded coverage. The judicial hands would generally tendered in much extent about the many important state issues. How do you consider, for example, gerrymandering could be handled in by judicial authority? Recently, the Constitutional Court of Korea has rendered some important decision which affects many politicians in sensitive status in terms of their election orders, and the equal protection of law in terms of voting right have been contemplated if any ratio could actually transgress the concept. So 1:2, over half of ratio would actually disparage the constitutional expectation and the equal right to vote have been actually infringed if the ratio exceeds the due extent. Then in some electoral district should be abolished in terms of law. Very affecting the kind of hopefuls or candidates, of course, and you'll see many important scope of constitutional rights, right to travel, and for example, you'll see a residence requirement confirmed by the court through decades or centuries of a precedent about a voting right was 1 year residence to receive full welfare benefits. So how do you weigh this ruling in terms of interstate travel? So right to travel is fundamental. It actually impacts on very much on personal. So in some cases, a strict requirement to receive full welfare benefits could be adjudicated to impede the free right to travel. The 1 year residency have been rendered invalid by a Supreme Court, and 1 year residence to receive state subsidized medical care also be struck down. It is invalid since it infringes with right to travel. 1 year residence to vote in state, it also turned to be invalid. And third day residency to vote in state, it is buried. And 1 year residence to get divorced, the law has been sustained, buried. And actually, you see in the printouts, which includes the excerpts, summaries of a constitutional law, and involving the First Amendment freedoms. Obscenity cases are one of a popular point of contention raised in the court. Seizures of books and films. Seizures of single book or film may be made with a warrant based on probable cause, although if the item is available for sale to the public. A police officer may purchase a book or film to use as evidence without warrant. Large-scale seizures must be preceded by a full-scale adversary hearing and a judicial determination of obscenity. And consider a movie censorship. And many interesting issues would embroil with the First Amendment freedoms. One graduate student named Mengsha from Bangladesh is now under my supervision, academic supervision, and she recently completed this presentation. Our thesis is well structured, which what actually useful to ascertain the amendments, constitutional amendment in Bangladesh. Her topic is especially focused on the First Amendment freedoms, and her intention is to explore the historical background about the constitutional amendments and some of discussions to describe the elements of amendment, and also the kind of a central statute expected to interact with that amendment. And his research is quite helpful to diverge in many of precious ideas, what actually historical facts and also the political implications in Bangladesh, and it is very informative that make us available of a new development in Bangladesh. Actually, the First Amendment rights, especially in case of a developing countries, is the kind of criterion very importantly observed about what a democracy or other modern requirement of constitutionalism. So very helpful. And his research method is also very actually explainable. So actually she provides fine fit for the legal researchers. The expectation is high, since we now generally very sensitive and cautious about plagiarism or the kind of desultory dealings about thesis production. And the concerns from his initial supervisor named Professor Lee Young-no actually is kind of authority in legal history and constitutionalism. So he is a principal academic advisor, and I was requested to chair the thesis committee, and we exchanged the views, opinions, and I made a comment, which is brief. Nonetheless, Professor Lee actually asked to get myself to be more stern about examination and comments. Actually, his mind is generous, but he likes to teach some lessons that is often required of prospective legal researcher. So the prospective legal researcher should have sense and basic equipment about the research community, so professional and also very competitive. So in response with that request, I now fake to provide any big comment. I'm not sure, but we generally agree to evaluate the product as precious. Since the topic is very distinct, and the deals could, well, actually, we generally are persuaded by his methodology, and also his structure of thought, and what contents, and what usual formality required of a master thesis. The footnote was pointed out since it is insufficient to support its main text. So Professor Lee Young-nok employed the footnote should be added. So often we have, actually the legal research is documentary, and the aspect is now in fine match with our class purpose. We have long discussed legal research and its methodology, and we find a general point of distinction from other disciplines, and the legal research requires much extent of documentary examination. Perhaps could be classed as kind of qualitative research method if we consider from a grand stance, and could be mixed in some cases with quantitative studies. The documentary basis of research would often require a scope of a footnote to support its argument. So generally, a small piece of research articles would entail 40 or 50 footnotes cases, and in-text citations would be required as a matter of a APA style or others. A blue book form of citation would generally prevail. The legal practice of legal research, you see. So either way could be acceptable, compensable. Nonetheless, we still see some, what actually pranks is what could work to awaken herself about more concerned position in completing the thesis. Very exotic experience, and the First Amendment freedoms will be a popular topic, and very good avenue to test the standard of national democracy. Freedom of association and belief, and what is the nature of right, electoral process. And you also see some cases involving vagueness and vagueness doctrine, or what is that? The theory is that the a statute or rule must not be vague. The standard for conduct must not be vague. So fair warning is one important concept of civilized law. When you advance to review the criminal law theory, what is fair warning? The idea could also be applied as similar in other areas of law. Actually, what is law, and what kind of ideal is predictability. and legal stability that we pursue. So you will also see the term standard of conduct. So the law and rule should provide some of standard of conduct that the law-abiding people could exercise their mind or intelligence in not violating the law, actually. Prohibition against treasonable or seditious uttering is fair. The idea would be a first point of impression, usually, and very foundational learning presented by law professors in your first year, class of contract or torts or criminal law, and you also ascertain its the kind of values that the law could keep safeguarded from infringement. The kind of predictability. Legal stability is an ideal. For example, the WTO would envisage importantly through the trade administration. The WTO is kind of a monstrous institution which has transformed from previous GATT, 1947 and 1994 GATT have been incorporated into WTO set of conventions, and will also have conformed the organization now get much larger, actually including many additional area of jurisdiction. GATS, what is that? A general agreement on trade of services and TRIPS agreement. And we also see some important effort to integrate the fragmented phrases about dispute settlement mechanisms. So understanding of dispute settlement, DSU, what it called in abbreviation DSU, will now provide a scope of comprehensive deals and provisions. Well, actually, the time element is one of travel, long, actually disgruntled by many concerned states and nations. So the process now is well hastened. So the disadvantageous status from neglect of process and time of procrastination in time could now claim the due context of dispute settlement, invoking provisions of DSU. The time procedural deals would focus on time element that each stage will have to be completed in the kind of concept involving statute of limitations. Of course, statute of limitations are another notion which plays in substantive law, and procedural issue would be viewed in other lens. Consider in any case, the time now could not be derogated by engaged parties. 3 months, 2 months have been mandated to complete each stage of process. I'm not sure if the WTO panel could have discretion or power to defer the statutory time period in the process, but often be viewed. In any case, practically it is very effective in terms of a judicial economy, and also the kind of speedy idea of speedy trial. The justice is not justice if it is brought in later. So the idea, and actually the WTO is fairly normative in terms of its characteristic, which should be viewed as distinct from previous GATT. GATT is generally political and also diplomatic. For example, the decisional panel could not enter into force or effect if without a unanimous consent of a member states. So all member states should agree on the decisional panel if the decision plays to bind the dispute parties. The reverse consensus system in new WTO would require the panel decision should be official without anyone vote of actually. So we could hardly imagine if all member states of WTO would disagree on the panel decision or decision of appellate party. So the panel decision would be automatical to come into effect, and the decision of appellate body would also be automatical to come into effect. So very normative. The context of operation is very judicial, when you usually find in the domestic structure of constitution. So we do not question the judicial decision in the national constitution, national constitutionalism. So the idea and the legal stability and predictability henceforth is very matched with the present characteristic of WTO. Of course, the reform proposition or other exterior suggestion would actually made abundant, especially involving the environmental group or other pressure group found in the international community and NGOs who many institutions actually one source of opinion and criticism to reform international organization. And the WTO law also comply with the kind of idea that the convention in some cases established kind of a system that the NGOs or international press group could file their opinion officially to support as a reference the expertise of a WTO panel or applicable. Well, many interesting points to be entertained in testing American legal systems. So please further on the printout delivered in the class in testing the constitutional law of United States. And now you'll see in the projection the titles of U.S. contract law, which generally considered in the first year of law class. So we first question what is contract, and we also see the importance of a contractual stages. The first stage will be involved with mutual assent, offer and acceptance. How do the parties in interest enter into contractual relationships? So offer and consider, for example, the sale contract. The seller would offer to sell the products or goods, and the buyer would accept his offer. Generally, meeting of minds is required to form a valid contract, and we also see some distinct element, what we call consideration, in the common law system. So general approach would be broken to require consideration if the valid contract considered to be a form, the kind of contract. But I regret the time is up, and we'll see soon for the second session. Thank you for your attention.